My son's wife looked me in the eye and said, "Just wait in the car, Dad. We'll come get you when it's over." I nodded. I said okay, and I sat in that parking lot for 4 hours while my grandson walked across that stage without me in the room. That was the moment I understood that some things, once broken, don't ask to be fixed. They just ask you to finally see them clearly. My name is not important. What I am is a father, a grandfather, a man who spent 41 years working at a sheet metal fabrication plant in Dayton, Ohio, who came home every night smelling like machine oil and tried his best to be present even when his body wanted nothing more than to lie flat on the kitchen floor. I raised my son, Marcus, mostly alone after his mother passed when he was 11. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to burial. I held his hand at the funeral and told him that it was just the two of us now, but that two was enough, that we were going to be fine. And for a long time, we were. Marcus was a good kid, quiet, serious, the kind of boy who read instructions before assembling anything, who saved his birthday money instead of spending it. I was proud of him in a way that sometimes made my chest ache. He got into Ohio State on a partial scholarship, and I covered the rest. $42,000 over 4 years. I didn't take a vacation once during that time. I drove a truck with a cracked dashboard and a heater that only worked on the passenger side. I told myself it didn't matter. He was building something. I was helping him build it. He met his wife, Nicole, in his junior year. She was sharp, well-dressed, the daughter of a real estate developer from Columbus. She had opinions about everything, about wine, about neighborhood property values, about the way certain people carried themselves in public. The first time I came to visit them at their apartment, she greeted me at the door and immediately said, "Oh, we were just about to rearrange the living room," like my visit was an inconvenience that had arrived slightly ahead of schedule. Marcus laughed it off. I laughed it off. That's what men like me do. We laugh things off and drive home and sit in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. They got married 3 years after graduation. Small ceremony, which I understood. Nicole's family handled most of the arrangements, and I was told to simply show up, wear the suit Marcus texted me a photo of from a department store website, and not make any toasts, unless specifically invited to do so. I was not invited to make a toast. I sat at a table near the back with 2 of Nicole's cousins who talked to each other the entire night about a timeshare in Destin. I ate my chicken, drank 1 glass of wine, and drove the 2 hours home by myself at 9:30. Marcus called the next day and said, "Thanks for being there, Dad. It meant a lot." I told him it meant a lot to me too, and I meant it, even from a table near the back. Their son, my grandson, was born 14 months later. They named him Carter. From the moment I first held him in that hospital room, this small, furious, red-faced person who smelled like something entirely new, I made him a quiet promise. I told him I was going to show up, whatever that looked like. The first few years were easy. I drove up to Columbus every few weeks. I took Carter to the park, to the library, to a little diner on 5th Avenue that had the best grilled cheese in the city. I taught him to tie his shoes. I helped him with his reading when he was struggling in 2nd grade. Nicole tolerated these visits with the same energy she applied to most things that weren't her idea, politely, and at a careful distance. When Carter was in 3rd grade, Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening and said they were looking at a house, a good house, in a good school district. But it needed a new roof and they were a little short. He asked if I could help. I had $68,000 in a savings account that I had been adding to for 20 years. Money I thought of loosely as my retirement cushion, my margin for error, the thing that stood between me and having to ask anyone for anything in my old age. I gave him $20,000. I didn't ask about repayment terms. I told him not to worry about it. 2 years after that, Marcus's company downsized and he was out of work for 7 months. I sent $1,200 a month to help cover their mortgage. Every month, on the 1st, I never missed one. Nicole never said thank you. Marcus would text. Sometimes, a simple "got it. Thanks, Dad." And I would read it standing at my kitchen counter and feel like I'd done something right. What I didn't understand then, what I was still refusing to understand, was that I wasn't building goodwill. I was building an expectation. And expectations, once built, don't feel like gratitude. They feel like entitlement. They feel like the ground beneath your feet, something a person stands on without noticing, without thinking about what it costs to lay it down. Carter turned 18 the spring of his senior year. He'd been accepted to the University of Michigan, full merit scholarship, which made me so proud I actually had to sit down when Marcus told me. I kept a photo of him on my refrigerator. This tall, serious kid with his mother's jaw and his father's eyes, and every time I walked past it, I thought about that little boy in the diner asking me to cut his grilled cheese into triangles, not squares, because triangles were better. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in late May. I'd known the date for months. I took the day off work. I'd gone back to part-time consulting after retiring, just to keep myself busy, and I drove the 2 hours to Columbus wearing the same suit I'd worn to Marcus's wedding, which still fit, more or less. I pulled into the parking lot of the arena and texted Marcus that I'd arrived. He came out to meet me. He was wearing a blazer I didn't recognize, and he had the look on his face that he'd had since childhood whenever he was about to ask me something difficult, a slight tightening around the eyes, a careful casualness in how he held his shoulders. "Hey, Dad," he said. "So, the thing is, Nicole's whole family is here. Her parents, her brothers, their wives, the kids. We got a block of seats together. But there wasn't a lot of room to plan for more." I looked at him. I waited. "Nicole thinks it might be easier if you just, waited here. We'll be out in a couple hours, and then we can all go to dinner. Carter knows you're here." I stood in that parking lot and heard every word my son was saying to me. I also heard every word he was not saying. I heard the $20,000 and the $1,200 a month. I heard every trip to Columbus, every Saturday at the park, every book I'd read out loud, every time Carter had fallen asleep against my shoulder in the car on the way home from somewhere. I heard all of it. "Okay," I said. "I'll be here." Marcus nodded, relieved in a way that made me tired. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. I'll text you when it's wrapping up." He went back inside. I got in my car. The ceremony was 2 hours and 20 minutes long. I know because I sat in that parking lot and watched the clock on my dashboard. It was a warm day, and the AC in my truck had been intermittent all spring, so I rolled the windows down and listened to a talk radio program I didn't care about and thought about a lot of things. I thought about the night his mother died. Marcus had been asleep in the chair next to her bed, and I'd been awake, holding her hand, and she had looked at me just before the end with this expression that I had never been able to fully decode. Peaceful, I think, but also asking me something. I had always assumed she was asking me to take care of our boy. Now I wondered if she was asking me to take care of myself. I thought about the $20,000, about the roof over their house, about whether Carter even knew I was in the parking lot right now. I got a text at the 2-hour mark. It was from Carter. It said, "Grandpa, are you here? Mom said you couldn't make it." I stared at that message for a long time. I wrote back, "I'm here, buddy. Right outside. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you." He didn't respond. The ceremony ended 20 minutes later, and Marcus texted me to come to the east entrance. I walked across the parking lot in my suit and found a crowd of people spilling out the glass doors, families with balloons and flowers, kids in caps and gowns, everyone blinking in the afternoon sun. Nicole's family took up a wide orbit. Her father, a large man with a prosperous handshake, was already directing a photographer. Nicole was straightening Carter's gown, fixing the tassel on his cap. Carter was smiling for pictures. I stood at the edge of this and waited for someone to notice me. Carter saw me first. He broke away from the group and hugged me, this tall kid folding down to reach me, and he said quietly into my shoulder, "I didn't know you were here." Not an accusation, just a fact delivered with a sadness that a 17-year-old shouldn't have to know how to carry. "Wouldn't have missed it," I said. I meant that too. We took one photo together, Carter and I, on someone's phone. Then Nicole touched Carter's elbow and said they needed to get the family pictures done before the light changed. I was not asked to be in the family pictures. I stood to the side, and watched them arrange themselves, Nicole and Marcus in the center. Carter between them, then her parents, her brother's children, a complete and self-contained thing, like a puzzle whose pieces all know exactly where they belong. At dinner, I sat at the end of a long table at a restaurant Nicole had chosen. I ordered a club sandwich. The conversation moved around me like water around a stone. I was present, but not in the current. Nicole's father gave a toast. Marcus gave a toast. Several of Nicole's cousins said things that were received warmly. I raised my glass when other people raised theirs. On the drive home, somewhere around the interchange outside of Springfield, I started to cry. Not dramatically. Just the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding something at arm's length for a very long time and your arms finally run out of length. I let it happen. I drove and I cried and then I stopped, and then I drove the rest of the way home in the dark. My neighbor, a man named Roy who had lived next door for 23 years and had the particular gift of saying true things without making them feel like attacks, came over the following weekend. I told him what had happened. All of it. The parking lot. The family photos. The end of the table. Carter's text about his mother saying, "I couldn't make it." Roy was quiet for a while. He was the kind of man who didn't fill silences just to fill them. Finally, he said, "You know what you've been doing, right? You've been paying for a seat at a table they were never really going to let you sit at." I didn't answer him. "That's not Marcus's fault entirely," Roy said. "He married someone who set the terms, and he's been letting those terms stand. But here's the thing. You've been making it very easy for both of them to keep doing that. Because you keep showing up and you keep writing checks and you keep saying okay, when what you should have said, a long time ago, was something else." I asked him what I should have said. Roy shrugged. "Doesn't matter now. What matters is what you say next." I spent 3 weeks thinking about what Roy said. I went to work. I came home. I fed my dog. I sat on my back porch in the evenings and watched the light change over the neighbor's fence. I thought about what I was and what I had agreed to become without ever consciously agreeing to it. I thought about Carter's text. "Mom said you couldn't make it." That was the part that had worked its way deepest. Not the parking lot, not the photos, not the dinner. The lie told to a boy, in passing, as if the truth was too inconvenient to bother with, as if my presence or absence was a logistical detail to be managed, not a choice that a 17-year-old boy would carry with him. I called my sister in Portland. She was 2 years older than me and had never liked Nicole, which she had communicated in the particular way of people who are too decent to be cruel by simply going very quiet whenever Nicole's name came up. I told her everything. By the time I finished, she wasn't quiet anymore. "Come out here," she said. "I mean it. I have the space. You can figure out the rest from here." I told her I'd think about it. What happened next didn't happen all at once. It happened the way most important decisions happen, gradually, then completely. I called my financial advisor and asked what the house was worth. He said the market in my neighborhood had been strong and I could realistically expect to clear somewhere between $280,000 and $300,000 after the remaining mortgage. I sat with that number. I thought about what it meant to be 63 years old with a paid-off truck and a dog and a sister in Portland, and no particular reason to stay in a city where I had been parking lot furniture at my grandson's graduation. I did not call Marcus right away. I want to be honest about that. Part of me, the part that had been saying okay for most of 2 decades, kept suggesting that maybe I should say something first, give them a chance to explain, wait for an apology that might still be coming. But I thought about that text. Mom said you couldn't make it. And I realized that the apology wasn't coming. Not because Marcus was a bad person. He wasn't. He was a man who had made a long series of small choices, each one individually defensible, that had added up to something I could no longer defend on his behalf. I listed the house in early July. It sold in 11 days. I gave my notice at the consulting firm. I scheduled the movers. I donated most of my furniture to a church thrift store on Wilmington Pike. I kept the things that mattered, my wife's photo, a box of letters, the fishing rod my father had given me, Carter's school pictures arranged in a wooden frame that I'd bought at a craft fair the year he started kindergarten. I did not tell Marcus I was moving until the week before I left. I called him on a Thursday night and told him I was relocating to Portland to be near my sister. I kept my voice even. I told him I loved him. I told him I wished him well. There was a long silence on his end of the line. "Dad, that's really sudden," he said. "What about? I mean, Carter's going to Michigan in the fall, but he'd want to see you before." "I'll be in touch with Carter," I said. "He has my number. He can call whenever he wants." "Is this because of the graduation thing?" Marcus asked. His voice had shifted into something careful and slightly defensive, the way voices do when a person knows the answer but hopes the question will land differently. I thought about all the things I could say. I thought about the parking lot and the photos and the end of the table. I thought about $20,000 and $1,200 a month and $42,000 in tuition and a truck with a passenger side heater and vacations I never took. I thought about a woman in a hospital bed with a question in her eyes that I had spent 30 years answering incorrectly. "I'm moving to be near my sister," I said. "I need to be somewhere that makes sense for me right now." He started to say something else, but I told him I had to finish packing and I'd talk to him soon. And I meant that. I wasn't angry. I wasn't punishing him. I was simply, finally, doing the thing Roy had told me needed doing. I was saying something other than okay. I left on a Tuesday morning. The movers had come the day before, and the house was empty except for my overnight bag and my dog, who was anxious in the way dogs get when the furniture disappears. I walked through the rooms one last time. I stood in the kitchen where I had made 10,000 meals and paid 10,000 bills and answered 10,000 phone calls and stood in the dark sometimes at 2 in the morning just because sleep had left without telling me. I locked the front door. I put the key in an envelope I'd already addressed to the title company. I drove to the mailbox at the end of the street and dropped it in. Then I drove west. I had been in Portland for about 3 weeks when Carter called me. It was a Sunday evening, and I was sitting on my sister's back porch, watching a hummingbird work over the feeder she kept near the railing. "Grandpa," he said. He sounded older on the phone than he had in person. More careful. "Dad told me you moved." "I did." "Portland's nice. Your great aunt sends her love. Are you okay?" I looked at the hummingbird. It was an extraordinary thing. That bird, the speed of it, the absolute commitment to what it was doing. All that energy concentrated into something smaller than my fist. "I'm good, Carter," I said. "I'm genuinely good." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I saw your text. From graduation day. The one that said you were right outside." Another pause. "I showed it to Dad. I didn't say anything. I just wanted you to know that I know," Carter said. "That you were there." I thanked him for that. We talked for a while after about Michigan, about his roommate assignment, about whether he'd looked into the engineering program or if he was still considering economics. Normal things. Good things. The kind of conversation that doesn't need to carry the weight of everything else because everything else has already been acknowledged, quietly, in passing, and set down. Before he hung up, he said, "I'm going to come visit. This summer, before I leave for school. If that's okay." I told him it was more than okay. I told him I'd take him to see the coast. After we hung up, I sat on that porch for a long time. The hummingbird was gone. The evening was coming in over the hills, that particular Pacific light that's different from anything in Ohio, softer. Somehow. Like the day is letting go instead of being cut off. My sister came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat in the other chair without saying anything, which was one of the things I had always loved about her. I thought about the parking lot in Columbus, the folding chair at the end of the table, the envelope in the mailbox. I thought about my wife in the hospital and the question in her eyes, and what I believed now that she had actually been asking, not take care of our boy. She knew I'd do that. She didn't need to ask. What she had been asking, I thought, was take care of yourself too. Don't forget that you're in there. Don't give yourself away so completely that one day there's nothing left to give and nothing left to receive. I had taken a long time to hear her, but I was hearing her now. The coffee was hot. The evening was quiet. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing music through an open window. Something slow, something I almost recognized. My dog put his head in my lap and sighed the way dogs sigh, like they've considered the whole situation and made their peace with it. I hadn't told Marcus I was done sending money. I hadn't needed to. The act of leaving had said it more clearly than any conversation could have. Some messages don't need words. They just need a locked door and a key in an envelope, and a Tuesday morning drive with all your important things in the back of a truck. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that. Because people sometimes confuse leaving with rage, and this was not rage. This was clarity. This was the quiet work of a man who had finally looked at the arithmetic of his life and decided that the numbers needed to change. Marcus would be fine. He had a good job, a paid-off roof, and a wife who knew how to manage things. Carter would be fine. Carter was, in fact, going to be exceptional. I had believed that since the day he asked me to cut his sandwich into triangles because triangles were better, he would go to Michigan and study something that mattered and become someone worth knowing. And when he came to visit me in Portland, I would take him to the coast and we would stand at the edge of the Pacific and he would understand, in the way young people understand things when they're standing somewhere enormous, that the world is bigger than the assumptions he was raised inside. And I would be fine. I was already fine. I was sitting on a porch in Portland with a cup of coffee and a dog and a sister who didn't fill silences just to fill them, and for the first time in longer than I could accurately measure, I was not waiting for anyone. I was not at the end of any table. I was not in any parking lot. I was exactly where I had chosen to be. I finished my coffee. I watched the last of the light leave the hills. I thought about calling Roy back in Dayton to tell him what I had said. Finally, the something else he told me I needed to say. But Roy would understand without being told. That was the thing about people who said true things, without making them feel like attacks they didn't need you to report back. They already knew. I took my cup inside. I washed it at the sink and set it on the rack to dry. Outside, the street was quiet, and the music from down the block had stopped, and the night was settling in the way nights do when you've finally stopped bracing against them. I went to bed, and I slept until morning, which was something I hadn't done in a very long time.